mix of European news and analysis live on Euronews. I'm Maret Gwyn, stepping in today for Maeve McMahon. Coming up on today's show, the EU's 27 foreign ministers are in town with Iran high on the agenda. After thousands were killed in the regime's recent crackdown on protesters, EU ministers are expected to approve fresh sanctions. Iran is also on high alert this morning for a possible US attack as Trump ramps up pressure on the regime to strike a deal on its nuclear program. Standing by for us at the European Council down the road here in Brussels, where ministers are arriving right now, is our EU correspondent, Shauna Murray. Shauna, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Tell us first, what can we expect today in terms of new sanctions on Iran?
Well, as we know, Mara, as you mentioned there, Iran very much back centre stage. We saw that post yesterday from US President Donald Trump saying there's a massive armada on its way to Iran. He's demanded they cut a deal on their nuclear programme. He's reminding them of last summer and his strikes against the regime under the code name Operation Midnight Hammer. Meanwhile, here in Brussels, EU Foreign Affairs Minister behind me, they're going into that meeting. They'll announce sanctions on 21 Iranian individuals responsible for the violent repression of Iranian protesters. That's members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Euronews has the details on these sanctions. They include people like the Chief of Police. There's also going to be sanctions on 20 companies responsible for Iran's new programme in relation to drones and supporting Russia. And there will be a designation of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organisation. This was announced or decided just late last night after France, which was holding out, decided they would support this. So we heard from Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, agreeing and saying that this would happen today. Mared?
And Shauna, also the question of how Europe can prepare to defend itself in an increasingly dangerous world could also come up in these talks.
The line's gone.
I believe we've lost Shauna there, but we did get that update on the sanctions that we're expecting the EU to announce, including that blacklisting of the IRGC, which is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. We will hear more from Shauna during the day here on Euronews. But in the meantime, we'll move on, and we're now moving on to the NATO boss, Mark Rutte. His comments earlier this week have divided opinion across the continent. Our Jakob Janus has been taking a closer look at who Mark Rutte really is.
Mark Rutte is on fire. And his message to anyone who thinks the EU can survive militarily without the US?
Keep on dreaming. You can't.
And there is backlash, but Rutte doesn't care. Why? Because he's the only European who speaks Trump's language. But when he takes off his glasses, who is he really? Meet Teflon Mark. He was the longest-serving Dutch Prime Minister because absolutely nothing sticks to him. He went from riding a bicycle in The Hague during his premiership to flying constantly across the Atlantic to put out NATO fires. And meet the pianist. He gave up his dream of becoming a musician because he claimed he wasn't good enough. But he mastered a different instrument called consensus. With the Greenland clashes testing the alliance, he's working overtime to keep 32 nations in tune, while Washington keeps trying to change the sheet music. And Brussels calls him the Flying Dutchman. Not because of the myth, but by constantly flying back and forth to the White House. He is a top collector of miles and more points. Finally, meet the good cop, complimenting Trump's bad cop. The man who once led Europe's frugal four, refusing to spend a single extra euro, is now pressing Europe to spend 5% of its GDP on security. And then there is the daddy issue. He once joked that Trump is the daddy of geopolitics. Well, judging by the leaked text where Rutte praises him, it seems Mark is trying very hard to be his favorite child. But Mark, being Trump's favorite is a hard job. And I am sure our friend Elon can tell you something about it.
Jakub Janis there. Coming up, we'll now be joined by Luxembourg's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Xavier Bettel. He led the country for a decade up until 2023, and he's, of course, a very familiar face here in Brussels and will be representing Luxembourg at the Foreign Affairs Council later today. Minister, thanks so much for calling by. It's great to have you here with us in the studio.
Thank you for the invitation.
So I know you have a packed agenda today. Let's start maybe with Iran, because we are expecting some tougher decisions by the EU today to clamp down and put pressure on the Iranian regime.
When you go in a meeting, you hope, but you wait till the end to be happy. So I hope that we will be able today to agree, because we need unanimity to put, for example, the Guardian of the Revolutions on the terrorist list. We need unanimity to take sanctions. We need unanimity to take a list of persons, of entities. But it seems we had 2 or 3 days ago still some countries hesitating, that we moved forward the last 48 hours and that we will be able to have a strong signal for the Iranian population today.
And this is the right signal, according to you, despite what it could mean for the diplomatic channels. Do you think this is the right move?
The fact is we don't have that many moves. We are not working like the USA are working to send an armada and to have the armada waiting to bomb.
And what do you make of those threats that we've heard from Trump yesterday?
Everything is possible. The fact is, I learned one thing. I was Prime Minister for the first years of President Trump, and now he's again the president. Everything is possible. He's
also trying to get a bigger role in the future of Gaza. I know that will also be under discussion. What do you make of his Board of Peace?
The fact is, if every progress for stabilization of the situation and a ceasefire and a final ceasefire, not a permanent ceasefire, not temporarily, and then a strong government and support to build up Gaza is something I support. But the problem is now, for the moment, we have a parallel UN. We have, in fact, a new private body, if I could say, who will decide about the future of a territory. So it's a bit special, and the Palestinians are missing. You have the Palestinians not around the table when it's going to be about their territory. You have a president, even if he's not president anymore, who has a veto right at life. And then you have Russia sitting around the table when it's a boat of peace, you just called it. I just want to remind that Russia is an aggressor in Ukraine. And so to give the feeling that they are peacemakers is a bit special too.
So you think this is less about the Palestinians and their future, more about Trump trying to supplant the UN?
The fact is, if it helps Palestine, I don't want to make everything bad. If it brings positive aspects on the ground in Palestine, I will help these points. But we need Palestinians around the table. But the fact is that Trump is a businessman. He wants to have results, quick results. For him, the UN is too complicated. But, I'm coming from a small country. If international law and international regulations are non-respected anymore in future, and it's the power of the strongest and the biggest, this is not good for me. And also for a lot of other countries, not good.
He has been challenging the very rules on which the international order is now based. But with Ukraine, he has managed to get Russians and Ukrainians around the table. Does he deserve credit for that? And shouldn't Europeans be doing more to get directly involved in these peace talks?
I just want to remind that he was the first one to take President Putin out of the isolation, bringing him to Alaska, where everybody was saying we need to show that we don't want to work with him. So he was the first one. We need a talk. Someone able to talk with Russia. But the fact is, I just want to remind that he said, I think it was 24, 48 hours when he was coming in office, that he would find a solution. And a solution cannot be humiliation of Ukrainians.
But
too many people died.
It's time for direct talks with President Putin. Should Europe be sending an envoy to these talks?
If we don't have talks, we want to find solutions. I had talks with President Putin and President Zelensky 3 years ago when I was still the Prime Minister, and every week, and we had good talks. But I have to admit that I had some pressure from other European countries who didn't want me to have these talks. They told me, Luxembourg, what is Luxembourg to be able to have these talks? That's a big error, because this is it's the question of human relations, not the question of the size of the country who makes a difference. And on the other hand, Bucha happened, and after Bucha I was not able to have these talks anymore with President Putin. But we need to talk with them if we want a solution. If we can't talk to them, we won't find a solution. And if I was too small to do it, if then President Macron or someone else is able to represent Europe because they don't want to talk to Kaja Kallas, but I think without talks we won't find solutions.
So Macron, anyone else you think in the continent who could represent you? You seem to know Putin. You've met him in Moscow. Would you be willing to take on this role?
I don't have the ego to say that I'm the right person to do it, but if people are convinced that I could be helpful, I will do it in any position. I don't need to be on the front of the scene. I can do it also on the back. When I had talks with President Putin and President Zelensky, I didn't speak that much about it. But then when there was a press statement from the Kremlin, it was difficult to deny anything. So, but if I can be useful, I love to be useful, but I don't have the ego to say that I'm needed.
Meanwhile, of course, the Ukraine war is raging on and Europe is really having to think about its future, the transatlantic relationship in tatters after the recent threat over Greenland and so on. How do you see the future? And what do you make of Mark Rutte's comments earlier this week that Europe can keep on dreaming if it thinks it can go alone?
If it's now, it's like now. For me, in fact, Europe has a wake-up call also because of President Trump. In fact, I see that we have rules, everything is in honeymoon. Who represents Europe? I see Kaja Kallas was, for example, not in Washington when there was discussions with the president. It's her job. So I think it would be important to see how we could have also legitimacy that for the next European elections, or the president of the Commission or the president of the Council should be someone who's got the legitimacy also from the electors. That would be in elections and they could be directly elected. So to be the one who can try to form the next Commission, and then they still need a majority in Parliament, but so that we have a president of Europe who is really the strong person. We are absent. There are discussions in some countries about Ukraine. Okay. Europe is not there.
We're going to have to leave it there, Minister. Thank you so much. We hope to get you back in the studio very soon. Now, moving on, public backlash is growing in Italy over the US's decision to send officers from its ICE immigration agency to the Winter Olympics next week. ICE agents were involved in a fatal shooting in Minneapolis over the weekend. For more, we can cross over to our correspondent Giorgia Orlandi, standing by for us in Rome. Giorgia, good morning. Give us a sense of what the reaction has been to all of this in Italy.
Good morning. Well, it all started last Tuesday when members of Italy's main opposition party in Lombardy's regional council held a formal protest against the decision to deploy ICE agents at the Milan Cortina Winter Olympic Games. They were holding posters reading "ICE out, ICE no thank you." That pretty much aligns with what Milan's mayor Beppe Sala had to say about that. He said that those agents are not welcome in Milan. We know that AVS, another party, launched a petition which has already gathered around 50,000 signatures. Criticism has also come from Italy's main ruling coalition. And we know that those ICE agents have been deployed at major sports events in the past, not just in the US, but abroad as well. The US Department of Homeland Security said that those agents would not be taking part in immigration enforcement operations in foreign countries. Despite all these assurances, though, the protest has not died down. Two ICE protests have already been organized in the next few days by centre-left organisations and trade unions. The main argument behind the protest, though, is that Giorgia Meloni is perceived as too accommodating towards President Trump and the United States. This is what centre-left parties say, and she has shifted her tone recently, trying to, when she described those Trump threats over Greenland as a mistake. But clearly, when it comes to high-profile events such as the Olympic Games, with Italy being under so much scrutiny and international exposure, the issue risks turning into a major reputational problem for Meloni and her government if the protests continue.
Okay. Giorgia, thank you so much. And that brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you for tuning in. For more on today's stories, do head over to our website, euronews.com. We'll be back, same time, same place, tomorrow. See you then.